Well, Wilson's prayer just kicked us off just beautifully. You know now what we're doing today. We're having two wonderful women who are going to talk about their stories, their life stories. So I want to I know that we're going to have some guests today too. So I want to welcome our guests to our Presbyterian Women's Program Series as well. And Susan Douglas is also, she is on the committee, the program committee, and she's also our chair of the day today. So thanks Susan. And we're really truly honored to hear from our two special friends at FPC. And I just want to let you know regarding questions, make sure you type your questions into the chat and I will scan those as we speak. By the way, I'm Julie McGrath, in case I didn't say that to our guests. Type your questions into the chat and I will monitor those as we go along. And any questions that we don't get to at the Q&A at the last 10 minutes, we'll continue those in the post session, which we have lovingly put together again this month. So you'll be able to ask more questions of Barbara and Martha in the post session. So, you know, when we finish the main program, take a 5-minute break and then come right back and we will have both ladies, with us for another half an hour. So if we don't get to all the questions, we'll get to questions during that session. And let's see, is there anything else? I again want to thank Wilson and Carolyn for all their technical help. We especially saw how great that was this morning in preparation, so we really thank them. And so I'm not going to introduce Barbara and Martha today. I am going to, their stories are going to introduce them. So I am going to just turn it over to Barbara, who is going to start with her story. And welcome Barbara and Martha.
Thank you, Julie. After days of brainstorming my life and who I am, I reached an unexpected conclusion. From childhood, I've been a journey of preparation for the series of faith encounters that have led to a closer relationship with Christ by way of a greater belief in the human spirit. I call it the other road to Damascus. I spent most of my life between Petersburg and Ettrick, Virginia. My mother was an embalmer and later the first Black female funeral director in the state. My dad was both a barber and heating manager in Hopewell and then Virginia State College. My first images of childhood are of a storybook time in Petersburg at the Westminster Presbyterian Church, to which I owe my preschool education, leading to my being able to start elementary school in the 3rd grade. I love to read. I have fond memories of also processing down the aisle of my church, Zion Baptist, with fellow 5 to 8-year-old Jules, as we were called, in our white robes, singing, "When he cometh to make up his jewels," or "He's got the whole world in his hands." Sundays were important, beginning with Sunday school to after church walks to Williams Drugstore for Sundays or milkshakes, and later to youth meetings at my church or those of friends at either Gilfield Baptist or St. Stephen's Episcopal. We learned as young teenagers of the equality struggles as my minister, Reverend Robert Williams, and Reverend Wyatt T. Walker of Gilfield were early leaders in the Southern Christian Leadership Coalition. Until I finished high school, I remember walking or biking to piano lessons at my teacher's home, ballet and modern dance lessons at the YMCA, as well as Girl Scout meetings. Playing the saxophone in high school band was fun too. Dispersed among these happy memories were as many unhappy ones, having to sing "Oh Danny Boy" for our 4th grade teacher almost every day, only to see her cry over the death of her fiance during the war. Or our mornings when in 7th grade, our teacher would greet our homeward lineup with "Come in, jackasses." Then the bullying remarks to me and my class from my classmates, or several treatments just because I'd made an A on a test. I remember purposefully writing French on a Latin test so I would fail and classmates would accept me, but my teacher made me take it over again. I watched the grief at the funeral home of loved ones over sudden death from what they called dropsy then, before anyone knew about cancer. Then I'd sometimes watch workers at the funeral home build caskets for those whose families could not afford the luxury. I learned early there were bad, unintentioned people in my segregated world and those in pain, but there were those who also cared deeply for others. Then there was always my terrier Patsy, waiting to ease any pain with her wagging tail when I came home. I've come to realize my road to Damascus was one of learning the coexistence of evil and pain with goodness and compassion in my bubble, long before discovering such in the world outside. And that early preparation continued through the forks, the turns, and over the bridges. On to my college days, the state of Virginia gave all valedictorians full scholarships to state colleges during my school years. Although I wanted to go to Juilliard to major in music and theater, my parents, knowing I'd probably end up waiting tables, said no, and I ended up majoring in English at Virginia State. Most students thought I was a music arts major because all my engagements, other than sorority or honor societies, were with the dance troupe, voice lessons, the a cappella choir, marching band, and orchestra. These were the activities that required me to sing in chapel each Sunday, but also allowed me to go on week-long tours. I remember both choir and orchestra staying in hotels owned by the Father Divine Peace Mission because of the low cost per night. Anyone as old as I will remember that movement practiced belief in the Christian Bible and its core teachings, but it also believed that Father Divine was God in the flesh. College friends and I still laugh at the irony of a call that came in one night at a hotel for one of our finest, but also promiscuous sopranos. The announcer said, "Bless Father, telephone call for CC Doe." I can't call her name. Countering these in the bubble experiences was the trip to Tuskegee University for a National Honor Society conference during my junior year. One of the two boys traveling with us needed a pit stop, so we pulled into a pure oil station just outside of Montgomery. The station manager announced the restrooms were only for white customers, but our advisor told the guys, go on. When the manager grabbed his shotgun and snapped the trigger lock, we were hastily instructed to get into the car and sped away. We quickly realized how close we came to being killed in a rural southern area where it was possible for no one to ever know what happened to us. Could the unrest taking place in the cities of Montgomery and Birmingham at that time have contributed to the situation? We'll never know, but we prayed together in the car for having survived. From that point on, I considered myself fully out of any bubble of protection from the real world around me. I went on to graduate magna cum laude and valedictorian of my class in 1958. By 1960, I had moved on first to Portsmouth to teach, and then to marriage and to Richmond. My road just missed the civil rights sit-ins and the Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee sponsored sit-ins at Kresge and McClellan's five and dime stores. In Richmond, we experienced a brief service in the Army where a shell exploded in Vernon's ear, leaving him 100% deaf in one and 80% in the other. Home again after 6 months in Walter Reed, we had a brief membership at All Souls Presbyterian as we lived in Ginter Park, about 4 blocks from the seminary. Our son attended the Presbyterian School of Christian Education preschool under the direction of Mrs. Newberry, for which a building was later named in her honor. We used the seminary library more than the public library. I began civic engagement as corporate wives were expected to do. My first board was 4 years on the United Way, located then on Monument Avenue. Service on that board prepared me for chairing the Mission Outreach Committee right here at First Pres later in life. We visited each agency who applied for grants, assessing the need in comparison to that of other applicants, and came back and made our decisions. Next, my road turned south back to Alabama. This time, the quiet city of Florence along the Tennessee River, Muscle Shoals being the area where Reynolds Metals sent Vernon to manage its personnel and the labor relations divisions. These operations were only second to their Chicago operations. Florence was metaphorically the suburb of Damascus, the place where our Christian understanding and the relationship with Christ changed from dogmatism to mutual respect. The road had rendered enough preparation to allow us, to face rejection as well as acceptance from anyone. As outsiders, attempts to find a house proved futile. The real estate companies declared they didn't want troublemakers, and not until corporate officials came down to meet with them did we find permanent housing. An NAACP leader in another town allowed us to rent his house until then. So from that point on, we were given back. I made it a point to serve on boards and committees. I sang in the choir at First Presbyterian and in the octet that furnished the music for the early services. We participated in all of the women's and men's organizations, and we never missed an opportunity for Wednesday night supper or the retreats that were held at the North Alabama Presbytery Camp Maranatha. We finally ended up on Riverview Circle it was, but before that, the university had hired me as one of its first Black instructors because they were trying to improve their diversity. Our son went to the elementary school, but before that, we would get calls in the middle of the night asking us to take that boy out of our elementary school. Our neighbors in the Riverview Circle area were business leaders in the town, and so they accepted us warmly. One was a Jewish family that had changed its name to Brown in order to be successful there. On the corner of the Circle and Riverview Drive was the only Frank Lloyd Wright house in the South, now a museum. Also Jewish, the only Stanley Rosenbaum taught with me at the university for $1 a year, just so he could be able to teach. The family owned every movie house in the state, and each of the 4 sons got their $1 million inheritance at 21. And when they decided to create a Japanese garden, they brought a professional over from Japan. I only mention their wealth because they taught us frugality. They drove Volkswagen Beetles, and Mimi drove like me about 30 miles to a store named Hay Goods to shop. Hay Goods was like our TJ Maxx here, but it was locally owned. In spite of everything, we enjoyed and settled into the church, and we were warmly welcomed there. That was a blessing for us. So we were in Alabama. The Alabama newspapers published articles on the performance of Man of La Mancha, with my playing the lead role of Aldonza, Don Quixote's Dulcinea, and the tenor was with the Birmingham Opera. We made many connections with visitors from other countries. With our hospitality group that welcomed them during their stay in residence at the Tennessee Valley Authority, they would teach us to cook their native meals, and we would then fellowship over meals in our homes. When Reynolds promoted Vernon back to the corporate office and moved us back to Richmond, I shed genuine tears. We had laughed at the Southern drawl while we were there, only to return to Richmond and have people laugh at our drawl we had developed. I owe so much of our positive experience and feelings of close relationships to Christ, to the Presbyterian Church, the Pres, as all of us members fondly called us, and to our minister, Wayne Todd, and his family, among our closely family friends. In fact, the first dinner invitation that we got when we moved back was from Newton and Cheryl Todd, Wayne's brother and sister-in-law. Newton had retired, at that time, he was still minister at Grace Covenant Church. I remember Jewel learned there was at least one difference in Alabama when she used the same hair preparation I used on hers to one of the Todd's daughters. It took several shampoos to remove that pasty result. Young Vernon also saw a difference as well. Seeing only dark-skinned maids and chauffeurs, he decided that he and I were Black and Jewel and his dad were white. That was 44 years ago, but we still have families with whom we're friends there. 2. Sadly, the others have passed away. Although the department chair's son was here briefly as the bishop for the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia. In the spring, we were back in Richmond in '74. I had immediately gone down to the symphony office to purchase our subscriptions. There I met lifelong friend Cheryl Yancey. 2 other women I met as a result of that visit were our own Beth Buckle and Ann Woodfin. These women graciously embraced me, and before I knew it, I was not only on the Women's Committee, now the Symphony Auxiliary, becoming vice president of audience development, but also appointed to the symphony board. Planning fundraisers further oriented me to Richmond and to the people and the businesses. We also enjoyed hosting performers with patrons in our home after symphony concerts. We continue the pledge to give back by supporting students financially. We still do. We've took on the zoning issue, which we had experienced in Florence and when moving back to Richmond, by joining the work of Housing Opportunities Made Equal, a group started by Florence Siegel, a well-known activist and educated here. She's 94 now. We would work as 2 couples, we being the second supposed potential buyers of homes in areas noted for zoning restrictions. Also soon after moving back to the Richmond area, we joined Barnea Presbyterian. I served on the diaconate and sang in the choir. We met several families there who also moved like us to First Presbyterian. One family, the Rollins, organized those of us who lived out of the immediate circumference of Barnea Church into a small group. We were called the Lunatic Fringe at our meetings in their home. You can imagine which Rollins named us that. Later, when Jewel was married here at FPC, they and several other FPC families, along with neighbors and friends, hosted the large group of New Englanders who came down to the wedding. Here at FPC, with my Christian family, we finally landed in Damascus, not with orders to destroy as with Paul, but to settle with these Christian believers their mission, values, and objectives. We taught the youth Sunday school class the first year we joined. I don't know whether that was 78 or 79. I was elected to the diaconate and then the session for a total of 18 years. I can remember serving here as chair of the preschool board, chair of the mission outreach. My service on the worship committee long before becoming chair goes back to Jack Sadler and Gordon Saxon as chair. Later came adult ministries and serving on hiring committees and the music committee. Vernon and I both served as advisors to confirmands. I was honored to serve on Dr. Blunt's advisory committee as he made his transition into the seminary and its community. Then there was the time as soprano section leader in the chancel choir with Michael Grant was there, playing in the handbell choir. Of course, the choir itself has offered a deep immersion into spirituality with the worship experiences before and after practice, the special performances, the choir retreats, the biannual musicals. Now, a few heartfelt memories. One is the day I stood up to speak to my mother at my mother's funeral in Petersburg. And guess what? I saw 2 rows of my FPC family sitting in the pews. Is that not true Christian love? It may not happen again, but I shall always remember the service for animals that Mary Kay organized and the booths we placed along Carytown one weekend during the Strawberry Festival, initiating people to our church and its mission. These took a lot of planning by our lay leaders and our staff. Finally, there's my multiracial immediate family, through which an even broader understanding of God's purpose has emerged. The introduction to and mutual respect for religious views have erased the confusion I had in college when I learned Christianity was but one legitimate practice. Perspectives run in our family from universalism to Judaism. We now feel as comfortable at a Seder as at communion. With so much positivity in my life, I've made a deliberate effort to sustain a relationship with Christ through relating to him and my fellow man in as many ways as possible in the church and in the community, especially in the many, many boards. We have so many sisters and brothers in Christ at FPC. What a friend we have in Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. We're now going to hear from Martha. And as I said, I'm watching for questions, so make sure that you put your questions in. And so I'm not even going to comment right now about Barbara's talk. We're going to hold that for later. But Martha, you all ready?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. I look forward to some more lunatic fringe parties with you soon. So I want to have a disclaimer to begin with. First of all, I might forget to mention my husband, but he is so threaded through my life. We used to talk that I'm like water and he's like the banks of a river. Without the banks of a river, I'm just a swamp. But when I'm in his river banks, I can go really fast. So I'm so grateful. And much of what I talk about is because of his support and patience and structure in my life. So I'm grateful. Also, Wilson has put in a link to one of my challenges. I want to include too much because God has been so good and so much has happened. And when I tried to look at sharing what I wrote, it would have been about 45 minutes, even talking fast. So you have what I wrote written. It's not proofread for the English teacher. I know some of you are proofreaders, readers on this call. Please fix it and I'll make it better. But for now, you can keep it, but don't think I'm going to be following it because I think what I want to do is to highlight some of the things and the stories. And then if you want to know my life, then you can read about it later. I'll be looking at the presence of the church in my life, and not just of the church, but of God. I'll be looking at the issue of race. I'll be talking about the life of dialogue, actually the dialectical tension between the kingdom of God being now, but not yet. And that was such an exciting idea to me at Duke, at the religion classes, that how can the kingdom be right this minute, but it's really not. And so I think that's one of the reasons I chose the email to live in the living in the and, because the and is the point of the connection between what is and what can be. And so anyway, that theme will be thread through. And then the other theme is life for me has been like dancing with God. Sometimes playing charades, well, step here, oh no, that's the wrong words. But so I hope you can get a feel for this as you read what I wrote, and perhaps as I share these stories. And when I was 10 years old, when I was asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to own a horse farm and have a horse run in the Kentucky Derby. And I wanted to be a missionary in Africa. So that was my living in the tension between a horse farm and a missionary in Africa. But God's story is almost so much better than we can ask or think. So now at 70 years old, I'm 78, but in 2013, I finished Boaz and Ruth and my journey, and I had to think of a new email because I was retired. And after you've been had your own email at Boaz and Ruth or at Martha's Mixture, you think, what do you want to? And so I chose a new internet home. I chose the middle word of Boaz and Ruth, the and. People used to ask us how we chose the name Boaz and Ruth. We were originally going to call it Gleanings because it was a story of Ruth meeting Boaz. And it was like God said. I meant to say, whenever I say God said, it's not like he's really sitting there talking, but sometimes he's just so clear. The few times I hear him really clearly, I'm going to just say God said. But he said, it's not a leftover community. And the story of Boaz and Ruth is not the story of a leftover people. And opening a program for former prisoners in a depressed community, that's not about leftovers. The important thing that I felt God was saying is the relationship between Boaz, who looked like he had more than he needed, and Ruth, who looked like she had less than she needed. But in essence, it took that relationship, that marriage of Boaz and Ruth, for the lineage of Jesus to be born. So we at Boaz and Ruth, we believe that everybody's a Boaz and everybody's a Ruth. But in the connection word, that's where it's important, the relationship word. So I chose my email. Send me one if you want, Martha at Living in the And. And then when I look back at my life, I see that that's woven through everything. The and, the connecting word for me represents my passionate desire to connect people, activities, places. I really want to get everybody to know one another. I have a passionate desire to organize. That means to put pieces of an organization into place so it functions well and they flow together. And I have a passionate desire to make trails. I'm a horseback rider, and I love to say, I want to get from here to there, and let's cut a trail and make it. So that's a connecting too. How do we get in the and from place to place? But most importantly, the and for me represents the point of the cross between the spirit and the flesh. It's the point of the kingdom that is to come and the kingdom that's not now. And it keeps me reminded that the way things are not the way things have to be in God's vision. And so it gives me energy and encouragement. Skip on down. I'm going to come on down to one of the major stories in my life. After Duke, you can read about that and my home life. We moved to Richmond and we're looking to buy a house. And I visited a realtor and he said, "Oh, take the MLS book home and choose some things you want to see on Saturday." Well, I chose 7 houses, and 6 of them couldn't see us. And the 7th one, he said, "Well, you don't want to live there. It's a changing neighborhood." Well, I didn't even know what that meant. This was 1969, November of 69. And I said, what does that mean? And he sort of sputtered and he said, well, crime is going to rise, the property values are going to drop, the houses are going to start looking bad, people won't keep up their yards, they'll park old cars in them. And he said, you're going to want to leave within 5 years, but you did get a goodbye, so you'll get your money out of it. That was sort of startling to me. I had never heard all of that. And I see now, in retrospect, how he was a product of and participating in the whole redlining thing that our church has just been studying. Well, we asked to see the house anyway, and we bought it. And he was absolutely right. It was a changing neighborhood because it changed me. It was one of the significant times in my life that we lived there. I think if we hadn't moved, I can't imagine what would have been lost of richness and relationships and knowledge. So anyway, you can tell I get really emotional about it. So we moved in, and that first night I was sort of scared because we had our money into it, and he had left me with those words the day he visited us and said, you've got a goodbye. And I woke up in the morning and I said, nope, I'm not going to let the realtor tell me what's to happen in life. So I went out and knocked on every door over the next month, started meeting people, because in connecting with people, all the myths and fears, they go away. And we had 350 houses in the neighborhood at that point. And one of the significant door knocks that I did was in the spring of 1970, and was a lovely young African-American woman with her garden. It was beautiful, much better than my garden. So all the real estate prophecies about yards looking bad was just wrong. But we started talking, and I said, well, where are you from? And she said, well, I'm from a little town you would never have heard of called Martinsville. Well, that's my hometown if you're reading that thing. And we would have been in the same high school class, except for the separate but unequal days. It was a really awakening for me of what damage we had done with the legacy of enslavement and racism. Another instance that I remembered living there, even though you choose to change and you want to be different, it doesn't come easy because the voices of the past are so strong. I mean, I belong to the Children of the Confederacy. My grandmother was the president of the the Daughters of the Confederacy in Martinsville. I mean, I lived on Plantation Road. So escaping the plantation as a white person doesn't come easy. But I choose to, but it doesn't mean you always get away. We were having a dinner. Abbott Lambert and his wife were our neighbors, and Harold Marsh, Henry's brother, and Peggy were our neighbors. And so that spring, I decided to have a dinner party. And as I was setting the table for that night, all of the voices from, I say not all, but many of the voices from my past just kept talking in my ear. You're going to have them sit at your dining room table? I mean, it was just such a loud voice. And I thought, what would your friends say? Will it impact Randy's job at McGuire Woods in Battle? What if somebody drives by and see you sitting down with someone that's Black? I mean, you don't choose those voices, but they came. And I can remember fighting and thinking, this is not the voice that I choose, but they were so loud. And I had an easy alternative pop into my mind. Well, just pull the curtains, and so nobody will know, and you won't be so tense. I struggled with the tension, and I chose to leave the curtains open. That was a significant step of freedom for me. Doesn't mean the voices don't come back, but it's every time every time I take an action and that chooses what I think God chooses the not yet of God's kingdom on earth, it puts me in a place that I feel like I should be. It's dancing with God and not stepping on his feet. So that was a significant time that I remember. In our neighborhood, we had many. There was a section in the newspaper that said colored houses for sale in the 60s, and then all the white houses got a zone, like zone. Windsor Farms was zone 2, and by 69, when we were looking, they dropped the word colored, but they left this column, houses for sale. So we, as a neighborhood, because the neighbors had decided, black and white, that we wanted to live the model, live into the vision of good neighbors come in all colors. So we asked the newspaper to drop the separate column and put everybody in a zone, not according to race. Well, they didn't want to do that. And so Randy got involved, other folks from the neighborhood, we got the Justice Department involved, and eventually we had the column removed from the newspaper, and they had to publish for 2 months an apology for having had the column. Our neighborhood started Arts in the Park as another way to say good neighbors come in all colors, because the real estate industry profited so much from the flipping of houses and flipping of neighborhoods that they didn't help them to show houses to help our neighborhood stabilize. I just do want to lift up one name, was Tom Jefferson, Presbyterian at Second Pres, who was one of the two white realtors who really was honest in his showing of our neighborhood. We successfully integrated and got chosen as one of the 3 by the Ford Foundation as one of the 3 successfully integrated neighborhoods in the country, and the only Southern one. And then in 2016, we were recognized in the National Registry for our work in civil rights housing. That's all good, but the main thing is God was at work making what was not yet just a little piece of his kingdom of wholeness and true connection happen and changed me, and I'm so thankful. Another result of that house was I had to promise Randy that I wouldn't ask for furniture for 5 years because it was a little bit above our budget. And, living in the and, I can always think of, well, the not yet is no furniture, but the vision could be furniture. So how do I make it happen? So I had a little bit of stock. I went to the bank, I borrowed some money, bought some antiques that I've been watching at, rented a shop for $85 a month down on Main Street, all in one day, and sort of mentioned to Randy at dinner that night that I was going to solve the furniture problem by opening a shop. It was life-changing for me too. It was just so much fun. And then the next year I opened a refinishing business. And as I saw people refinishing furniture, I would work with VCU students and their lives would change. It was really neat. So that was a little thread that I enjoyed. After two years of that, it was 1974. I had probably everything that most of my friends wanted. I had a great house, great children, healthy, good husband, and I owned my business. And back then, not many women did stuff. I mean, I had to still act as though I were a man signing all the leases. That's how they were written. But I just something was missing. And so a friend of mine, Jane Brame, some of you might remember the Brames, everything, same children, same law firm, we would talk about it. And she was searching. And one day she said, I've just found what I was looking for. And she'd started going to St. Giles she joined St. Giles. And I was so incensed because, of course, at Barnett Presbyterian, which where we went, anything related to the charismatic movement was like, don't believe that worldview. So I was so bad, I would have dinner parties and invite my minister and make sure Jane sat next to him so he could tell her all the bad things about what she was doing. but I saw her life change. And I was becoming more miserable and grumpy, and she was becoming more radiant. So the Christmas of 1974 had been, I thought, well, I sort of, somehow at Advent, you expect God to come. But it was a horrible Christmas. I had company, all I remember was being in the kitchen all the time. I had a 3-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and it was like Jesus hadn't come at Christmas. And on New Year's Eve, I was just at my wit's end, and Jane came over and got in on her hands and knees because my house was a mess, and mopped my kitchen floor. As she was mopping, she was just chattering about all the good stuff in her life that was happening by her relationship with God, and just radiant. Of course, it made me mad because, again, I was the religion major, and who was she to tell me something? But that night, before we went to 5 New Year's Eve parties, I sat there and said, God, okay, if you're real, I really need to know. And being the organizer that I am, I said, and could you do it in 40 days? I thought that was a good holy number, 40 days. And one of my challenges was weight. I was always struggling with keeping my weight. I knew when we went to our first party and I had no appetite the whole night for anything, I knew he had heard me and answered me. That night, or the next morning when I went to bed, I dreamed a theology of God. I can't tell you what it is now, but all the things that were, I don't know, frustrating to me from the death of God studies that I'd done and the exercise. I mean, it was like, I didn't have to give them up, but it all came together. And the next night I dreamed a theology of the Holy Spirit. I mean, it was just sort of crazy. It was like, again, all the voices came down, and then I could hardly wait to go to bed for the third night. And I dreamed really a theology of Christ. And as I remember it now, and as I remembered it then, and was telling people, it was like, you know, when you have an animal and their fur is all rubbed the wrong way. Well, that was what my faith was. It was sort of rubbed the wrong way and messy. But in those dreams, and in answer to the prayer, it was like God was rubbing the cat's fur all in the same direction. I didn't give up my intellectual part, but I came to a new experience of Jesus that really was a gift and a life change for me. The screen stopped. Does that mean I've given out of time? I can't hear.
Hey, Martha.
Can I keep going? My time up?
Yep. Well, in fact, I don't know how your screen stopped, but
Can
so
I? How much longer do I have?
well, how about 2 minutes?
2 minutes. Okay.
Because I mean, this is a nice. You know what? This is a very nice ending point. Why don't we have you and Barbara come together for a few minutes? We were going to try to get the two of you to talk about your relationships together and over time, and then we have a 10-minute chance to do questions and answers at the end. So why don't you? I don't know if you can see that, Barbara. Can you see?
Yes, I can.
Okay, and Martha, can you see?
Yes, I'm just still in my story. I wasn't at my stopping point, but okay.
Barbara, why don't we let Martha finish her thought, and then we'll get it started. So Martha, why don't you finish your thought, which was very powerful, by the way.
Well, I would just share a little bit more that I was really afraid to talk about my experience with particularly with the people in the shop, my antique in the refinishing shop, because they were so critical of faith. And so I didn't. I kept very quiet. And one day, one of them walked into, we had built across the street, and he said, I was reading John Sherrill's I Speak with Other Tongues. So I I stuck it in the drawer, and he said, "What book are you reading?" And I said, "Oh, I could hear God's voice say the scripture, 'He who is ashamed of me on earth, I will be ashamed of in heaven.'" So I pulled it out of the drawer and I put it down, and he said, "Can I read it?" Well, this young man from BCU, whole life was changed. He ultimately married a minister's daughter and was a deep follower of God because he read my reluctant sharing of books. I had so many times that um, I wasn't a bold witness, but God would make sure that somehow a book I was reading would be seen by my next door neighbor or someone. And he is making his kingdom come, even using reluctant witnesses. Just quickly going, well, I won't, you'll just have to read and there's a list of stories that I even didn't write down because God has worked so powerfully through the church. I will share this one story of how he worked for First Presbyterian Church. We changed churches in 1980. And so he, by that time I had Martha's Mixture, a big 15 refinishers, all alcoholics or recovering alcoholics. I don't know why I wasn't choosing that way as a job description, but they were. And John Trotty's class, his wonderful class, had speakers on substance abuse. Jay Maynard was the speaker. And this was new back then. It's not new now, but that alcoholism is not a sin. It is not a moral failure. It's a disease that can be treated. And particularly employers could do interventions. So because of that class, I went to Jay for counseling. Went to Al-Anon. I learned how to do interventions. And in 6 months, I had the chance to begin doing interventions with folks at Martha's Mixture. God changed their lives too. So all of this was a prelude to Boaz and Ruth, which you can read on the website, and you can read in my story or call me up and I'll tell you all the good things that God has done in Highland Park through First Presbyterian Church, through the people and the provision of First Presbyterian Church. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Wonderful.
All right, is that good?
Yes, thank you. All right, so I only see you, Martha. So we want to put Martha and Barbara together. There you are, both you are. So this is a time that we thought would be great for Martha and Barbara to talk about the stories that they have that kind of share, that they share together. They both gravitated and were at First Presbyterian Church. They had other kinds of connections, and I happened to overhear some of those stories. Susan and I were talking to Martha and Barbara, I guess last week, and just thought this would be a great time to let the two of you just talk to each other, and then we'll save like maybe 5 minutes for questions at the end. Although I'm not seeing many questions come into the chat, but I'll monitor that and we'll just see how it goes. Okay, ladies.
You want to start, Martha?
Well, Barbara, you have a better memory than me because I was so busy trying to hide my faith that I don't remember everything. But I do remember particularly this Christmas. Vernon won the Customer of the Year award. You all came in the week of Christmas, and Vernon wanted to give you a diamond ring to celebrate one of your anniversaries. I mean, it was going to be a big diamond ring. And you didn't want it. You wanted to have furniture. And so we ended up taking 2 truckloads of furniture to your house, playing decorator. And so it was exciting to see a diamond ring turn into furniture for us as having you as a customer, but mainly it was just so much fun to work with you and Vernon, and then to come and have dinner with you, that great salmon that you cooked. And it's good to see that you still have some of the same pieces in your house at Hathaway Towers. But that was a fun, and Vernon, that's the biggest husband had bigger sales, but that was the most romantic customer we ever had. So thank you.
Well, I remember all of the times that we were together, especially at your house at the Caroline, and the fun that we had in the fellowship, and your children and our children and our friends' children and our ministers. We all fellowship together, and it was amazing. I heard you talk about your awareness in having people see you at the dinner table. No one, you have grown so much out of that.
Good. That was just the first time. It was like, yes.
You are a true believer, and I know it, and we felt it. And our friendship together started that day we walked into the Martha's Mixture on Carey Street, and then we opened up Martha's Mixture South in our house. That was funny. We but the worship that we had together, whether it was at the church or whether in your house, or just the genuine fellowship that we had with you and Randy and the kids, will always remain in my memory, always. And that mischievous side of you that so many people don't know, I see it in your eyes. So that's a part of the AND as well.
Yes, it is.
I remember when you were in the choir and we had so much fun, especially when we did the shows. That was fun. I saw the picture that you sent around of us during one of the winter fests.
Oh, yes.
Those were great
that was
times.
great.
Those were the previews of our spring shows that we made during Winterfest time.
Well, I enjoyed being with you on the recent movie series that First Pres did with Coming to the Table. We were in the same small group. And I must admit, Barbara, I think I'm just amazed at your courage to, sometimes I wonder why an African-American would want to come to a church. And I mean, you were just so, just such a addition of love and presence to First Pres in so many ways. And
well, you know, we joined the church because it's in our neighborhood. We came to Bon Air rather than go all the way across the river to Overbrook. We would have been late every Sunday.
Well, I'm so glad that you
probably not active at all in the church. It was too far. But then Bon Air was right down Jank Road and around by Rattlesnake, and we were coming in the back way to the church. Yeah. And same thing with First Presbyterian. It might not seem like it's in the neighborhood, but it only takes us 6 minutes to get to First Pres. And now it's even faster now that we are closer to the river. But getting on the expressway and getting off, we're right there. And as far as being bold or not bold coming into the church, this is something that we had lived for a long time. I mean, we were the only ones at First Presbyterian in Florence. First Presbyterian in Florence was the only Presbyterian church, for that matter. And so it was a matter of doing what we felt we needed to do. Color, race, ethnicity wasn't even on our minds.
Okay. Well, we are blessed
and so are we.
Well, I have to say it. We have been blessed by both of you today. Both of your stories are very powerful, and unless you spend time with both of you individually, we would have never known what your full stories were. And not that these are full stories, I know, but at least we have a glimpse into your lives, and they're both so inspiring. So I'm just thrilled to that we have you for Sister Stories this year, because it's been such a pleasure. And I can't get enough of you, so we're going to do the post session. But any final thoughts or comments either of you want to make before we turn it over to Blair? I'm just delighted. This was so much fun.
I'm thankful because it made me do a bunch of writing. Who knows? I've got so many stories. Maybe I'll do a book.
Well, I also had to cut mine down. My daughter reminded me that I wasn't applying for a job, and so that I didn't need to give my whole life story. So there are a number of things that I could have said that I didn't say, but it has been a wonderful pleasure. And I look forward to the day that we can come back into the church and I can stop having to deliberately pass by it at least 3 times a week, just to look at it, and imagine who's inside.
That's great.
I just do want to ask people that are to at least look at the website of Coming to the Table, which is the current thing that I'm retiring from. And you can see it on the website, but I would have ended my story with that. So thank you all friends that are on there with Coming to the Table.
Well, thank you again, and just delightful, and I so enjoyed it, and I'm sure everybody else did too. So you're both amazing people. So Blair, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know you have a couple of announcements and you want to do a prayer and all of that good stuff. So, and then just don't forget, everybody, when Blair is done, then just take a 5-minute break and then come back, and we can ask, questions of Barbara and Martha.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Barbara. I don't know about the rest of you. I've been awkwardly stretching for tissues a couple of times. This has been a very moving Sister Stories. It often is when people, when we sisters bare our souls for one another. I chuckled at one of the comments. Sweet Amy Star Redwine reminded us that she mistakenly called this program Soul Sisters one time instead of Sister Stories. But it seems quite apt and very, very appropriate, as you have opened your hearts and opened your souls to us so completely today. And I look forward to a little more time with you in the post-program Zoom as well. I did send that link out via Realm yesterday, so if anybody's looking for it, just go to your Realm page to inbox, and it's there. It's the second link, and we look forward to having you join us. We'll give our wonderful angels a couple of minutes to take a breath, and then we'll reconvene. We invite all of you who are on to join us next month. It will be on April 13th next month, because of Easter falling when it did, and school systems on spring break. We landed on April 13th. Dr. Brian Blunt from Union Seminary will be our speaker, and those of you who've had an opportunity to hear him know that his messages are always most inspiring. The other thing, in addition to the different date, because of a little glitch in Brian's schedule, our meeting will be at 1:15 that day. This week, one person reached out to me and commented that this was kind of a tough time trying to get lunch over and done with, and had we considered doing our meetings at another time. We were sticking with the same schedule that we always had when we were meeting in person, but maybe Brian's program will be just a few minutes later and will be helpful. I know that you get the same newsletter, most of you, that that I do. We know that there are members in our congregation for whom we're all praying, and I would ask that you continue to do that in your daily prayer life. I would like to close with a prayer that was shared at the Ash Wednesday service at Westminster Presbyterian. It really resonated with me, and I thought it would be a perfect benediction for today's beautiful program. It actually comes from, it's adapted from a collective from sanctifiedart.org, and it was called Poetry and Prayer by Sarah R. The minister at Westminster, who is a friend of a friend, said, please give credit because we paid for this, you all didn't, and so I don't want to run into a copyright issue. So a sanctifiedart.org, if you're interested, check out their website. But if you will join me in prayer. As you leave this space, may your mouth speak of God's goodness. May your arms hold those in need. May your feet walk toward justice. May your heart trust its worth. May your soul dance in God's grace. And may this be your rhythm again and again and again until God's promised day. In the name of the lover, the beloved, and love itself, go with courage, go with heart, go in peace. Amen.